Good afternoon. Welcome to the Roland Grimes Sports and Entertainment Show. I'm your host, Roland Bubba Grimes, and as always, my co-host, the distinguished Mr. Self-Empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Wilbert Skipper. Skip and I have been at this for a little while, and every once in a while we bring on some guests that really have an intriguing story to tell. Well, sometimes they not only tell that story, but they also write about that story. This gentleman we have here with us today recently coined a book in relationship to or about Mr. Len Bias, and the book is entitled Born Ready, The Mixed Legacy of Len Bias. This gentleman has been a staff writer, I believe, with the Washington Times. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong.
Washington Post.
Washington Post. And some of us, so we have to make that correction.
Too, so.
We have to make the correction on the Google search engine. Right? He's also had some contributing work to ESPN, NBC, and a few other mediums. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to and put your hands together for Mr. Dave Ungrady. Dave, welcome to the Roland Grimes Show.
Happy to be here.
Dave, look, we're going to jump right into it. Why Len Bias? What made you decide to do this? I know everyone is asking you. Tell us what was on your mind, partner.
I've written two previous books about athletics at Maryland.
Okay.
And I was an athlete
Maryland, University of Maryland. Gotcha.
Yes. And I was an athlete there in the late 70s and knew a lot of people who were affected by Len's death.
Okay.
One being the athletic director, Dick Dole, who was an assistant coach on the track team when I was on the team, and he was a mentor of mine. Still is. I know him very well. Okay. And I saw the documentary, the 30 for 30 documentary with Len Bias. I saw it in late 2009, and it made me think what books had been written about Len, and I found that the two previous books written about him came out in the early 1990s. And I thought it might be time to do something, not about, and I looked at the books, most focused on how he died and the immediate aftermath.
Okay.
I wanted to do something on his legacy, how his death affected things. I knew how it affected the athletic department at Maryland. It had quite a traumatic effect on the department. I knew about the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. I wanted to find out more about it. That act was passed directly because of Len's death, and it changed the way drug offenders were penalized against a lot of young black men, by the way.
Okay.
And there was a lot more to it. I wanted to talk to the teammates, how they still felt about it, how they recovered from it. Found a lot of lessons of resilience, and I knew it would be a compelling story, and it really turned out that way.
Okay, look, my co-host ran in some of the same circles, and played on some of the same circuits, and he had sort of an intimate connection with Mr. Bias himself. And Skip, you had some things you wanted to bring forth in our conversation. I'm going to sit back and enjoy this conversation more than normal.
Finally, Roland's going to sit back and enjoy this conversation. We're talking basketball here. Now's my time, so stay tuned. It's going to be good.
Prelude to the Mr. Self-Empowerment Show. Skip.
Well, Dave, one of the things that when I think about Len Bias, the first word that comes to my mind is greatness. Lenny had greatness written all over him. My family knew Len Bias. I played with Len Bias. And Len was, he was a great kid. And as you said earlier, I mean, that story, of course, Len Bias' death touched a lot of people. When you started writing this book, what were some of the things that were going through your mind? I mean, I know you wanted to get to the end, and there were some things in the middle. But in the beginning, I mean, what exactly were you thinking about that just kept you moving forward to finish this wonderful book that you have out there?
I wanted to humanize the story as much as I could, and I knew the best way to do that would be to reach the people who were most affected by his death, and also who knew him in life, very close to him. So I had a goal of talking to every one of his teammates that year, and I did to all but one. And the one I didn't was David Gregg, who was with him when he died. I talked through his attorney. Terry Long, I did talk with on the phone. Terry Long was another teammate who was with Len when he died. He hasn't talked to anybody. And Terry did not want to talk for the book, but I got him on the phone, and he politely said, I'm not interested. I asked him twice, I'm not interested. And someday maybe he'll talk. I hope maybe he'll talk to me at some point for another version of this. I wanted to humanize it as much as possible, write the book through the eyes and the feelings of people who knew him best, really depict his legacy as completely as possible. When I started the book, the first person I met with was Brian Tribble, who was with Len when he died, and who many blame for Len's death. They say he provided the cocaine. That's never been determined to this day. Brian was acquitted of all drug charges in a trial a year after Len died. I had an interesting meeting with Brian, and for about an hour and a half, and he decided not to take part because he wanted to get paid. I didn't pay anybody for this book. But when I started, the point I'm trying to make is when I started the book, I was hearing back from people, yes, 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 yes. And then the further I got, the more resilience I found. People just had a very tough time talking about it. I did talk to...
Why do you think it was so tough?
It's still an emotional...
I know it's different for each person,
right.
but...
I think it's still very emotional for them. I still
30 years later.
30 years later. And when I talked to them, Jeff Baxter was one, Johnny Johnson another, who was a freshman. There were two of the 3 or 4 people I met with personally, Derek Lewis another. You could tell talking to them, they still have a tough time accepting the fact that Len's not here. John Johnson had tears in his eyes throughout almost the entire conversation. But I think they still have a tough time coming to grips that Len was a drug user. To the man, his teammates, except one actually, Phil Nevin, who didn't play much that year, to the man except for Phil, they all thought that was the first time he used cocaine, and that's not the case. And they still want to believe that. And I think it's part of it. They don't want to think that the Len Bias that they knew, who was an iconic figure, he was personable, he was silly, he was fun, he was the next Michael Jordan, and that's just not me saying that. Mike Krzyzewski equated Len Bias to Michael Jordan, and others. They don't want to believe that the guy they knew like that died like that. I think it's still a struggle for them.
Now, why was it important? Excuse me, skip for a minute. Sure. Why was it important to you, with all of the resistance that you were getting? Why was it important to you and for you to continue to make this thing happen, even though you knew it was causing a lot of pain, disruption, and discomfort to other people? Why go down that road?
I can be pretty stubborn.
That's just you.
Yeah, it's part of it. I'm a journalist by trade, and I knew it was a good story. I wanted to try to be true to the story as much as possible. And there were other people who would say, "Look, I know some people are probably telling you to do it, but I'm glad you're doing this because I want people to know how we felt about Len. I want to find out more about what Len was like, how it affected people, because there are some teaching points in this about making good decisions, how important it is to make good decisions, what can happen if you make a bad decision like Len did. Resilience, and I'm glad you corrected me on the resistance because I think I misspoke there. So it's good to have an editor. The resilience of a lot of the
he's very good at what he does. That's for sure.
The resilience of a lot of the people, the teammates, what they had to go through to recover from that incident to be successful. And interestingly, the 5 or 6 freshmen on the team that year, 4 who stayed with the program got their degrees. So, and that's almost 100%. That's an 80% graduation rate from one class of that program. So, and they went through a lot of tough times those 3 years with the team after Lefty Drizel left and with Coach Bob Wade. They really stuck it out, and I wanted to tell those stories, and I told it through their eyes and through their feelings, and I hope people who read the book can really just take that from it.
Well, now, Dave, we know that death in its own right can be very traumatic for families. In this particular case with Len Bias, I'm sure it's no different with his family. What was it like when you decided to write the book in regards to talking to Len's family, in particular his mom? We know that she's very active. She's an advocate for Len Bias. She talks to kids. She's very outward with her voice. What was that conversation like with Mrs. Bias or with the family?
Unfortunately, there were no conversations with the family. They declined interviews, and that was probably the most frustrating part. And they never gave me a reason. I sent letters, I sent emails, left phone messages, never got a response back. I would like to know why. I understand her resistance because it is a tough situation. As a journalist, but I saw that she talked to other people. She talked for the documentary. She did even recently did interviews for other members of the media. I'm not faulting her for that, primarily because I don't think few people in our lifetimes that we know have gone through what she's gone through. Not only with Len,
I don't know anybody,
but with Jay as well. So right. I give her the benefit of the doubt. I just wish I knew why. I did go to see her speak at a school in Pennsylvania, and I still write about her in the book and talk to other people about it, and how her career has evolved as a very prominent speaker and a successful speaker. And her speeches was very powerful, and I even went up there hoping that she would face-to-face have a discussion with me. She declined that as well. So it was frustrating. Maybe someday we'll talk about it. I did meet her at one, she spoke at the University of Maryland about a month and a half ago, and I was told to just try to get up there, and I was there otherwise for something else. And we did meet very briefly before her speech, but I didn't want to broach that subject because she was about to talk. So we talked for about a minute. It was nice to talk with her, but nothing's really come.
Okay, now you're a big boy.
I'm a big boy.
And, you know,
I'd like to think I am.
And we had a chance to talk off camera. You know, I'm a straight shooter.
Right.
You know, so what folks are going to ask, and it's okay because you're prepared to deal with this, and I know this just from our conversation. Folks are going to ask, why you? Why this? Why now? I understand the things about the story needs to get out, needs to be seen from different angles, etc. Why does Dave O'Grady need to be that person, or wanted to be that? Not why he wanted to be. What is it unique about Dave O'Grady that he becomes that person who tells the story from these different angles? Because other than being a student at University of Maryland, there's some other aspects of it in terms of basketball, culture, etc. that kind of causes questions in people's mind as to why this guy.
Sure. Very fair question. I'll go back a little bit to my connections to Maryland. The first person I called when I wanted to write this book was Dick Dahl, who I mentioned was the athletic director of Maryland when I was there, and a mentor of mine. Dick had been, for a couple of years prior to that, he says, Dave, when are you going to write my book? Because this is my fourth book. And I said, Dick, when you're ready to write the book, I'll write it for you. And we went back and forth. And the fall of 2009, Dick said, let's do it. And things fell apart. I never really pursued it.
Gotcha.
So when I wanted to write Len's book, he was the first person I called. And he said, I'm ready, this real story needs to be told.
Okay.
So from that perspective, the personal connection with Dick Dahl, who was I think one of the people most affected by Len's death. Nobody more than his family was affected by it, but Dick Dahl was, and his teammates.
Well, he lost the career, he lost, a lot of things.
And he couldn't find a job for 10 years. Right. And this guy was a rising star as an athletic director. Other schools wanted him around the country, so his life plummeted.
Went down.
It really did. My connection to the university, I thought being a former athlete there, and again, as I said, knowing people in the department would help me get access to them to talk about how the department was affected right after Len died, and that helped a lot.
Okay.
I talked to a lot of former athletic director, athletic personnel, and they provided a lot of insight. From a selfish standpoint, as a journalist, I want to try to write the best stories that I think that are out there. I hadn't seen this book done in this format based on his legacy. And sure, I wanted to be the first one to do it. I wanted to be the first one to do it, and I wanted it to come out on the 25th year of his death. Notice I'm not calling it an anniversary because that to me connotes a celebration.
Yeah.
And that was the 25th year was last summer.
Okay.
So I wanted to try to time all that. It didn't come out last summer. It came out at the end of the year. But those were the primary reasons.
Okay. Well, look, folks, we're going to take a break real quick. Obviously, we're dealing with a reasonably sensitive topic as we talk about this legacy, or as Mr. O'Grady puts it, the mixed legacy of Len Bias. Skip has had some intimate connection with Len Bias. I also traveled in some of the same circles and played basketball against and with some of his teammates, Adrian Branch, Jeff Baxter, etc. And I was recruited to University of Maryland as a football player as well during that time. So we have some things that we're going to talk about a little bit later, maybe in our closing statements, in terms of how we're going to approach this kind of thing moving forward, because it's important that we deal with that. If we're going to use this platform, we need to use it effectively, we need to use it responsibly, and we need to make sure that we use it in such a way that we educate, inform, as well as entertain, but also bridge gaps where they exist. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to ask you to take a quick break. This is Roland Grimes from the Roland Grimes Sports and Entertainment Show. We'll be back to you shortly. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Arthur McClinu. I've dedicated my life to providing surgical care to patients with heart disease. My life began in the slums of Soweto in South Africa, where I learned to overcome adversity and illnesses, including the death of my best friend. That's why I want to be a resource for you and your family for consultation related to heart and cardiovascular needs. You can learn more about me by visiting my website, which is at zuluchescutter.com.
Hey folks, thank you. Thank you. You're so kind. Look, as you know, we're dealing with some rather sensitive issues and topics as we talk to Mr. Dave O'Grady, a journalist, about his work in reference to what he calls the mixed legacy of Len Bias. We're going to jump right back into it. I'm going to ask a quick question. I'm going to turn it over to Skip so those guys can talk a little bit more intimately about some of that background and foreground. Real quick, Dave, let me ask you this. We have about 4 or 5 minutes and we're going to wrap up. But I want to, the first question I want to ask you is this. When you decided to title the book, why did you title it The Mixed Legacy of Len Bias?
Well, more importantly, Born Ready.
Okay, let's talk about that.
There was a give and take that he had with Coach Drizel. Coach Drizel famously talks about before games, Coach will go up to Len and say, "Len, how you feeling?" And Len would consistently say, "Coach, I was born ready." The irony of that title, well, it means he was born ready to handle anything with basketball. He showed that he could. The irony of that title is he was not born ready to understand what abusing drugs, specifically cocaine, could do to him. And the mixed legacy of Len Bias, because as we've talked about in the previous segment, there are a lot of traumatic moments from his death, how people were affected by his death. It was a very tough thing. But there are also positive elements to it. Coach Drizel also tells a great story, and I write anecdotally about this in the book in repeated situations. A gentleman approached him as he was leaving church a couple years ago in Virginia Beach, a gentleman he never met before. And the gentleman came up and asked, "Are you Coach Drizel?" He said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You coach Len Bias?" He said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Well, Len Bias saved my life." He said, "How did that happen?" The gentleman admitted that he was a cocaine addict, he had lost his job, he had lost his family. When Len died, he stopped using cocaine. It saved his life. I talked to young adults then, even teenagers, who said, they were young adults and teenagers when Len died. Len's death was the big traffic light, the stop sign that said, "Stop using drugs," and they stopped, or they never did because of Len's death.
Okay, Skip, these are my family members. So understand, I'm on a team. These are my family members. I lost a teammate very early. He actually committed suicide here in Cumberland, Maryland. His name was Wes Dove. To this day, when I look at Wes's pictures and I deal with this, Wes was a 6'7" Adonis, and a very good friend of mine when I played at Syracuse University. To this day, I can't handle and I have difficulty. And of course, when I read these stories about athletes going through some of the same things now, it brings me back to that day when my teammate came in, sat down and said, "Hey man, I just heard the worst news in my life." And I'm looking at him like, what happened? And he said, "We lost one of our teammates. He just killed himself." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, I play on the same team as you. Who are you talking about?" And then he told me. And I never forget that moment, I never forget that day. I don't necessarily want people talking about what happened in my family, in my locker room, in my showers, if they weren't in there. However, I understand that sometimes this needs to be told. What is it and how is it that you approach this kind of project, and what kinds of conversations are you having with Dave about how this project can be used in such a way that it brings about some positive consequences moving forward?
Well, actually, that's a loaded question, but it's a great question. I'm glad you addressed that
question.
That's what I do,
I load the
to me.
questions.
You know me very well. You know I'm going to knock this out the box, right? Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that in general, with my motivational speaking, I always talk about when bad things happen, is always a good things that can come out of it. And here we have Dave, who's written this book. And if I'm not mistaken, Dave, you have some ideals in moving forward as to what you want to do with this book as a platform to bring more good out of what some people said was a bad situation. So I'm okay with it from that standpoint. Now, in terms of Len Bias, his death, I will share this with you. When I got the news that Len Bias had passed, I couldn't believe it. It just floored me. Len was not only a friend. I really look at Len and his family as a family of mine. I had an opportunity to really get to know Len Bias, so I was floored by that. So I sympathize with you, with your friend that you lost. Now, I will say this. I believe that this platform that Dave has is one that's going to help a lot of people. You spoke about that with the one situation that you had with the gentleman who was on cocaine, who it saved his life. I am all for doing things like that. Anything that can help somebody, I'm for it, and I think this platform is going to do well.
Okay. But when someone talks about something that's going on in my family, and we haven't had that conversation, how do you handle it when you hear the conversations about what was going on with your team at that time? How do you receive that? Is it difficult for you to talk about it, or is it something that you can talk about rather
Well,
openly?
I think for me in particular, I'm a little different. I always take the high road, and my wife can speak to this. I take the high road with everything. Even though you're here, you might hit me with a gut shot, I'm going to take the high road.
No, if I hit you with a gut shot, I'm joking.
Well, coming from you, that might be a little different. But for me, Roland, I've always approached life that way. So to answer your question, that has happened before. Okay, it's happened in the locker room. It's happened in my family. I find a way to get through it by taking a high road. Now that's just me. Everybody don't approach it that way. Some people are a little more stuck on it, and there's a revenge piece for them because they feel like somebody's attacking them. You know, I always look at the attack mode and things like that. By taking the high road, I'm able to turn that negative into a positive, and that's what I love to do.
Dave, real quick, and we're going to deal with this on an ongoing thing, but what one or two messages are you trying to get across, or would you like to get across to the viewing audience while you have this platform? What is it you want to say to us that we can take away that makes us want to, A, read your book, and two, what do you want us to come away with?
For the young members of the audience, high school, middle school, college age youth, this book proves that you make one bad decision, it can ruin not only your life, it killed Len Bias, it can affect a lot of other lives. And I think beyond that, people, I think, want to understand what his life and his legacy is all about, and I think hopefully the book does that.
Okay, I commend you for your audacity.
Definitely.
I commend you for your courage. I'm going to watch real closely.
I look forward to that.
All right, God bless. Look here. Hey folks, we're going to wrap things up right now. Roland Grimes Sports Entertainment Show coming at you. We'll see you next week. Good luck, God bless, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.